One might argue that if Rena had simply kept her head down the way she had every single day for the last 9 years, the beta would never have had cause to notice her at all. But then again, if Korik had been even half the second his king believed him to be, he would never have made the mistake of dragging a quiet serving girl into the ring to laugh at her. So really, when the court told the story afterward, and they told it for a very long time, the blame belonged to him, all of it, every bruise, every dented helm, every royal guard left groaning in the dirt, while a girl who poured ale for a living stood over them, not even breathing hard. But that came later. First, there was only the proving and the smell of trampled grass, and Rena carrying a tray she had no intention of putting down. The proving came twice a year to the Stone Crown, and twice a year the common folk of Highreach climbed the switchback road to watch it. Anyone might step into the ring and challenge for a place among the royal guard. Almost no one ever won such a place. What they won instead was a lesson, delivered in front of the whole city, about where a low wolf belonged and where a low wolf did not. Korik ran it that way on purpose. A frightened city was an obedient one, and the beta liked his cities the way he liked his ale, quiet and beneath him. Rena had served at these things for years. The grey hind sent her up the hill with the other pourers, and she moved along the benches, filling cups and saying nothing, which suited her, because saying nothing was the one thing in all the world she was truly gifted at. Other wolves gave off scent the way a fire gives off heat. Anger, wanting, fear. Rena gave off nothing. To a nose she read as blank, as empty air, as no one in particular standing exactly where someone ought to be. She had learned young that a girl who read as no one could walk through any room in the realm and be forgotten before she reached the door. She had built her whole life on being forgotten. It was safer than the alternative. She knew that better than she knew her own name, which was why, when Korik's voice cut across the yard, she did not at first understand that it was aimed at her. "You there, the pale one with the tray." The benches hushed. Rena looked up and found the beta grinning down at her, from the edge of the ring, broad and gold, and pleased with himself, the way he always looked when he had found someone small to enjoy. Beside him, a boy was on his knees in the dirt. Pell, the kitchen boy from behind, barely 16, who had climbed into the challenger's line on a dare and gotten exactly the humiliation the line was built to give. His lip was split, he was trying not to cry and failing. "This one belongs to your house, does he not?" Korik said. "He fights like a scullery rag. I thought perhaps the girl who fills my cup could show him how it is done." The court laughed, because the court always laughed when Korik wanted it to. "Come, sweet thing, set down the tray, give my guards about, we could all use the entertainment." Rena did the thing she had trained herself to do her whole life. She looked at the ground and she said, quietly, "No, my lord. I only pour." It should have ended there. On any other day, it would have. But Korik was bored, and a bored beta is a dangerous animal, and he reached down and hauled Pell up by the collar and drew back his hand to strike the boy again, harder, for the crime of being laughed at. And something inside Rena that she had kept chained for 9 long years stood up all at once and put its hand on the latch. She set down the tray. She set it down very carefully, the way a person does when she knows that the next thing she does cannot be taken back. "Let him go," she said. "I will stand your bout." The yard roared. Korik dropped the boy and spread his arms wide to the crowd, delighted, already savoring the picture of the serving girl flat on her back. "She will stand a bout," he crowed. "You heard her. Send in Doran gently. Now." We would not want to break the king's ale supply. Up on the high seat, half in shadow beneath the black banners, the Alpha King himself leaned forward with the mildly curious expression of a man watching a coin spin, wondering which way it would fall. Rena stepped into the ring, and she meant to lose. That was the truth of it, the part she could never make anyone believe afterward. She meant to take one clean blow, go down, and be forgotten by supper. That was the plan. But Doran came at her the way big men come at small women, careless, certain, already looking past her at the crowd. And 9 years of a chained thing came up her spine in a single silent rush, and her body did what it had been built to do long before she ever learned to be no one. She did not remember deciding to move. She remembered the after. Duran on his knees, wheezing, his own wrist bent the wrong way in her hand. The second guard already coming and already falling. The third, she did not strike to wound. She struck to end cleanly, the way water ends a candle. And one by one, the finest wolves in the royal guard met the dirt of their own ring at the hands of a girl who read as nothing to every nose in the yard. When it was over, the silence was so complete that Rena could hear her own heart, and under it, faint and awful, the sound of a court realizing it had been shown something it was never meant to see. 12 guards down. Not one of them able to say how. And in the middle of them stood Rena, tray forgotten, chest heaving, the chain snapped clean, everything she had spent her whole life hiding, lying naked in the open air for the king and the beta and the entire city to stare at. Korik was not laughing anymore. The king rose from his seat. He came down the steps slowly, and the guards, who could still stand, went to one knee, and he crossed the churned grass and stopped an arm's length from Rena, and she saw his eyes for the first time. They were the gray of a blade, left out in the rain, and they were not curious now. They were doing arithmetic. He looked at her the way you look at an answer you were not expecting, and are not sure you can afford. "What is your name?" the Alpha King said. It was not quite a question, and Rena, who had spent 9 years being no one, opened her mouth to lie, and found for the first time that she could not remember how. She did not sleep that night, and by morning she had convinced herself of 3 separate futures, each one worse than the last. The gray hind was quiet when she came down. Too quiet, the kind of quiet a room makes when everyone in it has been talking about you and stops the moment you appear. Sella was behind the bar, wiping the same clean cup she had been wiping for what looked like an hour. Pell sat by the cold hearth with his split lip and would not meet her eyes, which told Rena more than any words could have. Sela finally set the cup down. "So," Sela said, "you want to tell me where a serving girl learns to fold the royal guard like wet washing?" "No," Rena said. "No," Sela agreed, unsurprised. She had known Rena 8 years and had never once gotten a straight answer out of her about anything that mattered, and she had long ago made a private peace with it. "Well, whatever you are, you had better decide what you are going to do about it, because you did it in front of the whole city, and the whole city has a mouth." She hesitated, and the hesitation was worse than her bluntness. "Rena, they are saying the beta means to have you taken up." There it was, the first of her 3 futures, arriving right on time. "On what charge?" Rena said, though she already knew there did not need to be one. "Does a beta need a charge?" Pell burst out from the hearth, and his voice cracked down the middle. "You made him look a fool in front of the king. Men like Korik do not forgive that. They bury it." He was on his feet, now wretched, wringing his hands. "This is my fault. If I had not gone up in that line, if I had not, you would still be. You would be safe. You would be nobody. And now I am somebody," Rena said softly. And there was the whole of her grief in 3 small words, though only she could hear it. For 9 years being nobody had been the roof over her head and the lock on her door. A wolf who read, as nothing could not be found, could not be used, could not be lost, the way she had once been lost. She had made herself into empty air on purpose, because the last time the world had looked at her and seen a weapon, it had taken everything she loved to get its hands on the weapon, and left her with nothing but the training and the ruin. She had sworn never again, never seen, never wanted, and in one heartbeat, to spare a boy a second blow. She had thrown the whole 9 years into the ring and lost it. She did not say any of that. She was still deciding whether to run, and where a person runs to when her own scent cannot betray her. when the door of the Grey Hind opened without a knock, and the morning light behind it went dark with the shape of soldiers. Not Coric's men. Rena knew Coric's men. These wore the black of the king's own house, the close guard, the ones who answered to no beta at all, and they filled the doorway and did not draw their blades, which was somehow more frightening than if they had. Rena of the Grey Hind, the foremost said. The king commands your attendance. Now. Sela went white. Pell made a small broken sound. And Rena, who had built a life on reading, as no one understood, with terrible clarity, that the reading had failed her at last, because every wolf in that doorway was looking straight at her, and there was nowhere left in all the realm to be forgotten. She thought of the king's gray eyes doing their arithmetic. She thought, he has decided what I am, and now he has decided what to do about it. And the not knowing which was worse than any answer could have been. She went. What else was there? She let them walk her up the switchback road she had climbed 100 times with a tray, past the ring where the grass was still torn from the night before, in through the great doors of the stone crown that a girl like her was never meant to pass. And with every step she told herself, the worst of it was a cell, and with every step she believed it less, because a king, who lets a nameless wolf humble his guard and walk away, only teaches the next nameless wolf to try. He could not let it pass. She knew that the way she knew her own hands. They brought her to a small stone room, gray and cold and empty, and left her in it, and the door shut, and Rena stood alone with her heartbeat and waited to learn her sentence. Then a bell began to toll somewhere above her, deep and slow, and she heard, coming down through the floor, a single set of footsteps, unhurried, easy, one wolf, walking toward her, taking his time. The footsteps stopped outside the door. And Rena's whole body went still in the way it only ever did before a blow, because she knew, the way prey knows, exactly who was on the other side of it. The door opened, and Torin, king of all Caldmere, walked into the little gray room, and the air changed. Rena felt it before she had even turned, a pressure against her skin, the whole weight of a true alpha filling a space that had been empty a breath before. She had known he was the king. But coins do not carry this. The quiet total certainty of a wolf who had never once needed to raise his voice to be obeyed, who took up all the room there was simply by choosing to stand in it. Last night she had watched him from below and thought only that he was tall. Standing before him now with the door shut, she understood that she had been very stupid and had made herself an enemy of a man who did not need enemies to end her. "Ah," the king said, looking at her with those rain-gray eyes. "There she is, my blushing bride." Rena's mind went entirely white. "You're," she said. "What?" "My mate." He said it pleasantly, the way another man might remark on the weather, and he strolled past her to lean against the cold stone table, as though he owned it, which, of course, he did. The whole court will have heard by now. "My long-lost mate, hidden all these years in a common inn, revealed to me at last in the ring by the fire in her blood. Very stirring. The songs will be dreadful. Do try to look moved." She stared at him. She could not for the life of her tell whether he was mocking her, and the not knowing made her reckless, the way the wine had once made others reckless, though she had never in her life needed a drop. "I have never met you," she said. "There is no bond between us. You know there is not. I would feel it. Would you?" He tilted his head, and something behind the ease sharpened. "You are a hollow, Rena, of the Grey Hind. Do not bother to deny it. I watched 12 of my guards go down to a wolf they could not smell, and there is only one kind of wolf a nose cannot find. Your line were the silent blades of my grandfather's grandfather, before they were hunted to the last. And a hollow, my dear, gives off nothing. Not fear, not wanting, and not the note of a bond." He spread his hands, and the smile that spread with them was slow and certain, and she thought furiously entirely too pleasant to be trusted. which means when I stand up in my own hall and tell the realm that the answering rang between us in that ring, that fate itself put a queen in a serving girl, there is not one wolf alive who can prove me a liar. Because there is no scent on you to check. You are the perfect lie. You always were. You simply never had anyone clever enough to use you for it. And there it was. Rena felt the trap close around her ankles as neatly as if he had drawn it in the dirt. She was, at that moment, a nameless wolf who had crippled the royal guard. That was a hanging offense in any realm, and a merciful one. But a hollow was worse than a criminal. A hollow was a horror out of the old wars, a blade that walked through walls, and a frightened court does terrible, thorough things to horrors. Deny the king's claim, and she was a monster to be put down before she could be turned against them. Allow it, and the whole mad business became fate. A love story, untouchable. Why, she said. Her voice came out lower than she meant it. Why would the Alpha King bind himself to a serving girl he does not know? What do you get? For half a breath, the ease dropped clean off his face, and what lay under it was tired and hard and older than his years, and then it was gone, and the smile came back like a curtain drawn. A blade, the king said softly, that no one in this palace owns but me. You have no idea, Rena, how badly I have needed one of those. He pushed off the table and went to the door and paused with his hand on it. Someone in my house is trying to kill me. They have been trying for the better part of a year, and every wolf I might trust to find them answers to some beta or some house or some old loyalty older than my crown except you. You answer to no one. You read as no one. You are in point of fact the only wolf in all of Caldmere, I can be certain, was not sent. He looked back at her, and for just a moment, the mask thinned enough that she almost believed the thing underneath. Play my mate, let me keep you close. Help me find the hand behind the knife, and when it is done, I will give you a name so heavy, no beta in the realm will ever dare touch you again. That is the bargain. You may take the night to hate it. He opened the door. On the threshold, he glanced back one last time, and the pleasant king was firmly back in place. Dinner, he said, this evening. Wear whatever you like, though I am told it is customary to make an effort. And he smiled at her, warm and false and dazzling. I do so look forward to getting to know my bride. Then he was gone, and the refusal Rena had been building died unspoken in her mouth because the bell above her had stopped tolling, and in the silence it left behind she could hear, distant and unmistakable, the sound of Coric's voice in the corridor, asking a guard where the hollow was being kept. Dinner was laid in a small, high room where the windows looked out over the whole sleeping city, and Rena sat in it like a prisoner, waiting on a verdict, which, by her own reckoning, was exactly what she was. The king arrived without ceremony, still in the day's plain gray, and when his eyes found her across the little room, something in them flickered that she could not name and did not trust. Well, he said, you made an effort after all. It suits you. She had not made any effort at all, had come in the same worn linen she served in, and they both knew it, and she understood that this was simply how he was, that he draped charm over every silence the way other men reached for wine. You mock me, she said. I compliment you. You are unused to the difference. Sit, eat. You look as though you have not slept. And I refuse to let my future queen faint into the soup on our first evening. It would start such rumors. She did not eat. She watched him instead, the way she had learned to watch anything that might turn out to be a threat, and she waited for him to make his move, and he did not. He talked. He told a long and ridiculous story she was fairly sure was invented on the spot. And somewhere in the middle of it, without meaning to, she asked the question that had been circling her all day. Why me? Truly. You, said a blade you could trust, but a hollow you have never met, is not a blade you can trust. It is only a blade you cannot see the edge of. That is not the same thing. The king set down his cup. When he answered, the ease had gone out of his voice. Because I saw why you did it, he said. In the ring, you did not step in for glory. You had spent 9 years running from glory. You did not step in for coin. You stepped in because a boy was about to be struck a second time and you could not stand it. He leaned forward. A wolf who breaks a 9-year silence to spare a scullery boy one blow is not a wolf who was sent to me. Sent wolves are careful. You were the opposite of careful. You were the least careful thing I have ever seen. It was the most honest thing I have ever seen, and I have spent my whole life surrounded by liars, so believe me when I tell you I know the difference. It was, Rena thought, a very good answer. Wanting to believe it was exactly how a clever person got made a fool. Show me, she said instead. You want to hunt the hand behind the knife. Then show me the house. All of it. Not the throne room, the parts a king never sees. The store rolls, the watch rotas, the ledgers. No one thinks to lie in because no one important ever reads them. That is where a thing like this hides, not in the great hall, in the small dull rooms. Kings did not go crawling through storerooms. Instead, he stood, and the boyish eagerness that came over him was so sudden and so real that it undid a little of her guard before she could stop it. Now, he said, show me now. I have wanted for a year to understand my own house, and every wolf I asked has answered with a bow instead of the truth. Show me the dull rooms, Rena. Let us find out together whether it is as simple as I think it is. And he was already halfway to the door, this king the realm called soft and distant, this king who by every account had never once dirtied his hands, holding it open for her with the plain hunger of a man handed a puzzle he actually wanted to solve. So, she showed him. She meant to march him through it like an inspection and be done. But the moment they stepped into the long, cold spine of the fortress, the corridors and the storerooms and the guard yards that a serving girl learns without ever being taught, something in her, that the fine high room had been strangling all evening began, at last to loosen. She showed him the requisition rolls where 40 spears were ordered and 12 arrived, month upon month, and asked him where he thought the rest had gone. She showed him a watch rota with a name doubled on the east gate and told him it was 2 wolves standing where one would serve, because an order had been given twice and no one dared cancel the first. He did not give her the royal platitude she braced for. He held out his hand for the ledger and said, show me who signs when the beta is away. And when she told him, whoever is nearest the seal and feeling important, he laughed. A real one, startled out of him, and she felt the answering tug at her own mouth before she could stop it, and hated how easily it came. They were bent close over the ledger in the lamplight, shoulder near shoulder, and she had just realized how close when she heard it, a scrape, stone on leather, off in the dark of the yard, where the shadows pooled thick under the wall. She went still. Stay behind me, she breathed and shoved him toward the wall, and the king had just opened his mouth to make some easy joke about her tender concern, when the crossbow bolt punched through the air where his skull had been and buried itself in the door frame with a wet crack. They came out of the dark all at once, 4 of them, blades, bare, faces wrapped, and a wolf does not wrap its face unless it means to be able to do this again tomorrow. Rena did not think. The chain was already off, had been off since the ring, and there was a clean, cold pleasure in not having to pretend any more. She put herself between the king and the first blade, and turned it and broke the arm that held it and moved on before the man had finished falling. The second she took at the knee. The third came for her back, and she felt it more than saw it, and dropped, and the blade hissed over her, and she came up inside his guard and put her elbow through his wind. The fourth broke off running, and she let him, because a running man carries a message back to whoever paid him, and a message could be followed. Silence crashed back over the yard. She stood in her crouch, blade up, chest heaving, and only then felt the long hot line where one of them had cut her forearm. Well, said the king, from exactly where she had left him against the wall, sounding for all the world like a man who had watched a mildly diverting play. "You do know how to show a wolf a memorable evening," she rounded on him. "You are not surprised." The blood was running warm off her fingertips, and she barely noticed. "Someone just put a bolt through the door, a hand's width from your head, and you are making jokes. You knew. You knew tonight might end like this, and you brought me out into a dark yard." Anyway, the pleasant mask slipped. "Just for a moment. I hoped," he said quietly. "There is a difference. How many times?" She took a step toward him and he did not retreat. "How many times has this happened? Tell me true, or I walk back down that hill tonight, and you can find your own knife." He held her eyes for a long moment. "3," he said at last. "This is the third." There was a strap on my saddle at the hunt that had been cut most of the way through. There was a stair that gave under me that no right will admit to loosening. And now this. He looked at the 3 wolves groaning in the dirt, and something bleak crossed his face. "Each time I have buried it. Do you understand why? Because the moment my court learns that someone is truly hunting me and getting closer, every house that ever wanted my crown will smell the blood in the water, and I will be dead inside a fortnight. Not from the knife, but from the pack that gathers once they know the knife exists." He met her eyes again. "So, now you know. You are the only wolf in Caldmere who does. That is either the greatest trust I have ever placed in anyone, or the greatest weight I have ever hung on a stranger. I have not decided which. Have you?" Rena looked at him, this maddening man, and could not for her life tell whether she was standing in front of a king, playing the fool, or a fool she kept mistaking for a king. She did not answer him. She bound her own arm with a strip of her sleeve, refusing his help, and she thought, "I am keeping score now," and the list of things that did not add up was already getting long. For the better part of a month, that was how she spent her days. She watched him, because watching was the thing she was best at after fighting, and she meant to watch until she understood exactly what he was hiding, because a wolf that hunted mattered, and a wolf that laughed at being hunted mattered more. The king did not cooperate. She would ask a sharp question, and he would answer with a joke, or turn the talk sideways so smoothly she would not notice until they were 3 subjects gone. She would corner him on the assassin, and he would tell her she was magnificent when she was suspicious, and mean it, which was worse. And the trouble, the real trouble, the thing she could not put in any ledger, was this. The longer she watched him for danger, the more she found she was simply watching him. The line of his throat, when he tipped his head back against a door frame in the lamplight, and how she would lose the thread of her own sentence and have to start again. The 2 cups of hot spiced milk he carried up to the cold east wall one midnight, because he had noticed, without being told, that she took the worst watch herself and told no one. The brush of his fingers over the backs of hers when he handed her the cup, and the way her whole arm lit to the shoulder, and how she nearly dropped it, and covered by glaring out at the dark. "You are not watching the stars," he murmured close, in a voice pitched only for her. "They are stars," she managed. "There is nothing to watch. They are rather outdone tonight," he said. And he was not looking at the stars either. He was looking at her, openly, in no hurry at all, and Rena, who had faced down armed men without a flicker, could not hold his eyes for the length of a single breath before she had to look away. He smiled into his cup like a wolf who had won something and said nothing, and let her stand there in the cold, with her heart going like a war drum. That was the unbearable part. Not that he might be lying. That she could no longer tell how much of it was, and that lying in her narrow bunk after the late watches, her body humming and sleep a country away, she did not care. It came to a head as these things do in the small hours, in an empty room when she was too tired to keep the chain on anything. He found her in the old armory, where she had taken to sitting when she could not sleep, which was every night now, and sat on the bench across from her as if he had done it 100 times. No ledger, no question about the watch. Nothing she could file the visit under, just him, in the lamplight watching her. "What do you want?" she said, and it came out rawer than she meant, all the frayed month of it in 3 words. "Rest. Mostly," he said. "It has been in short supply. Do not." She was on her feet, without deciding to be, and her hands were not steady, and she did not care. "Every day you will not say what you are truly after, and you will not leave me be, and you carry me milk in the cold and look at me and I cannot keep doing this." Her voice cracked clean across and she let it. "Tell me it is the plan. Tell me you need a sword you can trust, and nothing more. Tell me anything that makes sense, because I was not built to want things I am not allowed to have and you are making me want, and I do not know how to stop, and it's going to get me killed." She stopped. Too late. The words were out in the room, where she could not call them back. "Want what?" the king said, low, and there was no ease in it now. No joke. Nothing but a quiet so total she could hear the lamp gutter. "Do not make me say it." She pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes. "You have known for days. You have been enjoying it." He stood. He came around the bench the way a wolf approaches a thing that might yet bolt. Slow, hands open, and stopped close enough that she had to tip her chin up to hold his eyes. "What if I simply want you?" he said. "Not the blade. Not the hollow. Not the perfect lie. You. What if that is the whole of it, and there is no clever second reason at all? Men like you do not want women like me." It came out a whisper, and she was staring at his mouth again, and could not stop. "You do not believe me," he said softly. "So tell me to go and I will. I will walk out of this room and never trouble you again, and you can keep your chain and your silence and be no one for the rest of your life, safe as a stone." His voice dropped to almost nothing. "Or ask me to prove it." The armory was very quiet. Her pulse was very loud. "Prove it," she heard herself say. He kissed her, and every careful thing in Rena's head went white and silent at once. His hand slid into her hair, and his mouth was warm and certain, and there was no crowd to perform for, no court, no crown, only the two of them, and the low lamp and the sudden total overwhelming fact of him. Her knees forgot their purpose. She made a sound against his mouth that she would have died of shame over if she had a single thought left to be ashamed with. And then some old wary part of her, the part that read the world when the rest of her could not, caught what her nose never could on anyone else, because she was a hollow, and hollows sent nothing, and yet pressed against him. Like this she could feel it rolling off him in a hot, dark wave, unmistakable, helpless. Wanting. His. For her. She had been wanted for her hands, for her silence, for the blade under the serving girl. She had never once in her life stood in the plain, uncle-ever path of a wolf who, simply, desperately wanted her, and it folded her resistance in half like wet paper. She fisted her hand in his collar and dragged him down, and kissed him, like she had been thinking about it for a month, because she had. His hands found her waist, the small of her back, and drew her in close, and she shivered head to foot at the wanting in it. This was not the plan. This was not a blade, or a lie, or a bargain, struck in a cold, gray room. This was only a man wanting her for no reason, but wanting. And God's help her, she wanted him back. The lamp burned low. The old armory kept its secrets. And for one whole night, for the first time in 9 years, Rena, of the Grey Hind, was not no one to anyone. She was his, and she let herself be, and the rest belonged to the dark, and to them. She had stood guard at the edges of 100 feasts. She had never once been a guest at one. Now here she was in deep blue, borrowed and beautiful, standing in the great hall of the Stone Crown, while the whole court pretended not to stare at the serving girl the king had made his bride. She caught his eye across the room, and he smiled, slow and private. The same smile he had given her that morning when she woke in his rooms, and the tight knot under her ribs eased. "You look like something out of a song," he murmured, appearing at her side, his hand warm at her back. "I look like a fraud in a stolen dress. You look like you are mine," he said, low, and his eyes were warm all the way through. which makes me the luckiest wolf in the realm, fraud or no. He tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. Come, let me walk you past every jealous fool in this hall, so they can all see what I get to keep. The feast was for a guest, she had learned. Warden Oster of the Sunmark, whose lands guarded the only pass south, had come north with his son to renew an old peace, and the whole court glittered with the strain of it, because a warden who could open a pass could also close it, and everyone in the hall was smiling with their teeth. The king steered her out at last, onto a colonnade, where the music thinned and the cold night air came up off the gardens, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "You hate this," Rena said, watching him. She had spent the last days learning the shape of his laughter against her throat, the way he said her name in the dark, and she could tell now, without a nose, when he was and was not enjoying himself. He was watching the dancers through the arch, and his easy smile had gone somewhere else. "Hate is a strong word," he said. "You are lying." He laughed, surprised. And then he turned to face her, and the charm went out of his face like a candle pinched, and what was left underneath looked tired and young and very alone. "I am, aren't I?" he said. "I have been doing this since I was 19. The smiling, the performing, being exactly what they need to see, so that none of them look too closely at what I am not. My father was a mountain. I am a wolf in his coat, holding it up with both hands and hoping no one notices the coat is empty." He stopped, shook his head, smiled. But it was thin and it did not reach his eyes. "Ignore me. Too much wine, not enough. Torin." He met her eyes, and for a heartbeat she saw him brace the way he always did when someone came too close to something real. She reached up and touched his face. His breath caught. The false smile crumbled all the way down. "You are not the empty coat," she said quietly. "You are the wolf, underneath it, the one who carries milk up a cold wall for a girl who tells no one, the one who wanted to see his own storerooms. I have watched you for a month looking for the lie in you, and the man I found underneath all the smiling. I like him. I like him a great deal." Something cracked wide open behind his eyes. "Rena," he said, and his voice had gone rough. Then he kissed her, fierce and grateful, and something close to desperate, and she leaned into him, into it, and the world shifted under her feet. It was not the heat. She knew the heat by now, the wanting, the familiar molten pull. This was something else entirely, relief and fear, and something fierce and unbearably tender, a warmth that poured in through the place where they touched. And it was not hers, she could feel him. His feelings, distinct and clear and utterly foreign inside her own chest, and under it, rising impossibly, a low sound like a struck string, a note, a resonance in the center of her that no hollow had ever made in the whole history of her hunted line. The answering. Rena tore back with a gasp, her hand flying to her sternum, where the note still hummed. Torin's eyes were black with it, his breath ragged. "Did you?" He started, and his whole face was open, astonished. "Rena." I think that was the... He took a step toward her and she saw it in his face. The wanting, the desperate need, to close the space and touch her again, to prove it was real. And every old terror in her 9 years deep, every lesson that being wanted meant being used, and being used meant losing everything, rose up in a single black wave and shut her mouth. "It was only a kiss," she heard herself say. "Torin froze a kiss," he repeated. His face shuddered and then went carefully, terribly blank. "Yes, of course. Probably nothing," but his voice had changed. Gone distant, gone hurt, and she hated herself, and could not take it back. A servant appeared at the edge of the colonnade with a silver tray, 2 cups of wine, dark as old blood in the moonlight. "Your Majesty," he murmured and offered it. Torin, still looking at Rena with that wounded blankness, reached for a cup, and Rena's whole body screamed wrong. She did not decide to move. Her hand shot out and knocked the cup from his fingers, and it shattered on the stone. "Do not," she said, and her voice did not sound like her own. She was already down in a crouch over the spreading wine, and she caught it then. The thing that had made her wolf scream. The thing she of all wolves in the realm was built to catch. Under the wine and the oak, there was a smell that was no smell at all, a blankness, a hole in the air where a scent should be. The wine had been laced with something that read as nothing, that hid itself the way she hid herself. "This is a hollow's poison," she whispered, and the cold of it went all the way down, scentless, made to slip past every nose in this hall. She looked up at him, kneeling in the broken glass and the dark wine. "There is only one kind of wolf who knows how to make a poison. Read like nothing, Torin mine. Someone in this palace knows hollows, knows us, and they just tried to kill you with our own craft. You will tell no one," Torin said. They were still on the colonnade. The servant fled, the wine seeping black between the stones, and his hand had closed over her wrist, not to hurt, to hold, and his face had gone from wounded to hard, in the way she was beginning to understand, meant he was doing the arithmetic that kept him alive. "No one," he said again. "Not the guard, not the warden, no one. There is a foreign power 50 feet from us, with an army that can close the southern pass. If word gets out that someone poisoned the Alpha King, under his own roof, at his own feast, on the very night he was meant to renew a peace, I will have a war before the candles gutter. Do you understand me?" "No," she said, pulling her wrist free. "No, I do not. You want me to smile and dance and pretend no one just tried to murder you again? The 4th time now?" "Yes," he said simply. "Torin, someone in your house knows what I am, knows my line's own craft. That is not a jealous cousin with a saddle knife anymore. That is someone old and deep and patient, and I cannot protect you if you tie my hands and swear me to silence. I know." He reached for her, and for once she let him, and he pulled her against his chest and pressed his mouth to her hair. "You are brilliant, and you see everything, and you are the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I am asking you to trust me this once and let me handle it my way, just tonight. Can you do that? Can you trust me?" Every part of her that was still the wolf who had built a life on trusting no one said no. But the note still hummed faint under her ribs where his had answered hers, and she heard herself say, "All right, I promise," and felt the lie of it even as it left her. He kissed her forehead, quick and grateful, and the warmth poured through the touch again, and then he stepped back, and the mask slid smoothly into place. The easy king with everything under control. "I will be back soon," he said. "Wait for me." And he walked back into the light of his own hall as though nothing at all had happened. She gave him a slow count of 30, then she followed. She kept to the edges the way she had been born to. She watched him smile and nod, and turn aside a warden's careful questions with practiced grace. She watched him step through a side door, and she watched the moment he was out of sight of the hall, the smile drop clean off his face like a dead thing. Her stomach dropped with it. She followed him down 2 flights, into the cold spine of the fortress she had shown him herself, toward the small dull rooms where a wolf hides the things that matter, and her heart was climbing higher in her throat with every step, because there was only one reason. A king crept down into the dark alone, on the night he was nearly murdered. The door at the end was the old muniment room, where the deep house records were kept. She crossed the last of the dark, and pushed it open without a sound. Torin stood behind the record table. The locked chests were open. He had a sheaf of old rolls in one hand, and on his face, caught in the single candle, was a look she had never once seen there in a month of watching. Not charm, not calm, guilt. For a long, breathless moment, neither of them moved. "Rena," he said. His voice was very steady, very careful, the smooth one he used on frightened counselors, the one he had not used on her in weeks. He was using it on her now. "This," he said, "is not what it looks like." He never paused. In a whole month, she had never once seen him without the answer. already on his tongue before you finished the question. And now he stood behind the record table with the old rolls in his hand, and he paused, and the pause told her everything, and nothing at once. Say something, she begged him without a word. His jaw tightened, her stomach fell away. Someone tried to put poison in your cup an hour ago, she said. You swore me to silence over it, and then you come straight down here in the dark, alone, to go through the deep house records like a thief in your own vault. So tell me, Torin, tell me what I am looking at. Tell me true, because I am out of guesses, and I am nearly out of trust. He set the rolls down slowly. I have been investigating Alder, he said. The name did not resolve into meaning. It was only a sound, and then it was not, and the whole floor tilted under her. Alder? She said. Alder Highford, the ringmaster. The old wolf who had run the proving before Korek before he grew too gray for it, the people's blade. The champion of the last war, beloved in every low tavern in Highreach, who had once, 9 years ago, found a ruined hollow child in the ashes of a burned holding and taken her in and taught her in secret everything she knew about how to end a wolf and how to disappear. Alder, who was the one warm thing left in all her life. Alder, who had raised her. Do not, she said. Do not you dare. He is bleeding the guard dry. To buy loyalty in the low city, Torin said, quiet and relentless. The spears that never come, the rotas that contradict, the coin that goes up the chain and dies, all of it deliberate, all of it flowing, to houses that would see me gone and a captain of the people raised in my place. And the wolves who have tried to kill me. He looked at her, and his voice went gentle in the worst possible way. They have been carrying his coin, Rena, every one. No, she said. You do not know him, he is not. He found you in ashes, Torin said. Did he ever tell you who lit them? She stopped breathing. You needed someone close to him. She heard the words come out of her own mouth, flat and cold, arriving somewhere ahead of the pain. Someone Alder trusted, someone raised at his own hand. The pieces were assembling themselves now, quiet and terrible, whether she willed it or not. That is why you claimed me. In the gray room, you did not need a blade. No house owned. You needed his blade. You needed the one wolf in the realm Alder Highford loved, turned in your hand and pointed back at him. A drunk fool of a serving girl broke a 9-year silence in your ring and handed you the one weapon in all Caldmere that could get close to him, and you took it. He said nothing. He held her eyes, and he did not deny it. Say, I am wrong. Her voice broke apart in the middle. Torin, say I am wrong. He looked at her for a long moment, and she watched him search for the words, and he did not say she was wrong. She pressed her face into her hands. She had been so stupid. All the questions. Who holds the seal when the beta is away? Who signs the rolls? Where does the coin die? She had thought he was interested in his house. She had thought he was interested in her. All of it, she whispered. It was all a lie. Not all of it. He came around the table and she backed into the corridor, and he stopped at once. The way he stopped for her every time, and she hated that it still moved her. Rena, please. I will not pretend the claim did not begin as a way to reach him, but it stopped being that, on the wall, in the armory. On the colonnade tonight, when your soul answered mine in front of the whole court, and you looked me in the eye and called it only a kiss. That was real. The note does not lie. It cannot. Why did you not simply ask me? She said. If you suspected him, why not tell me? Put it to me plain. Let me choose. Because he raised you. His steadiness frayed at last. Because every belief you own about this crown, that it is rotten, that it is cruel, that a high-born wolf looks at a low one and sees only a tool to be used and thrown down. Every one of those, Rena, is his. I have heard him preach it in the low city with my own hidden ears. And then I heard it come out of your mouth, in that ring, word for word, his sermon in your voice. And I knew that if I told you plainly, you would never believe me over him. You would think I was the liar, and I was afraid I was right. That struck her silent, because she could hear it now. Alder across 100 firelit nights, grinding his teeth over the highborn and their soft hands and their short memories. A king never goes hungry when the grain fails. They see us as tools. She had carried his grievances in her own mouth for 9 years, and never once noticed they were not hers. "You should have told me," she said, shaking. "You watched me put my own body between you and a blade. Twice I bled for you in that yard. I let you into places I have never let anyone, and in all of it, you never once told me the truth. Why not me, Torin?" He looked at her, and when the answer came it was barely a breath. "Because I did not think you would believe me, and I did not think you would trust me enough to turn on him, and I was right. Was I not?" It hit her like a slap, because it was not wrong. So she reached past it, to the older wound, the one that had been there long before him. "It does not matter," she said, and her voice went to ash. "You wanted the weapon. You looked at a hollow, and you saw exactly what the world has always seen. A blade someone left lying around, useful and nameless and easy to point. Not a woman, never a woman, the weapon. I told myself you were different. I let myself believe, for 1 month, that someone could want the wolf and not the edge on her, and you sat there and let me believe it, because a believing blade cuts truer than a bitter one. That is not what you are to me," he said, and his hand came up, reaching, fingers curving to cup her jaw the way they had on the colonnade. "Do not." She jerked back so hard her spine hit the cold stone. "Do not say it. Not now. Not when the only reason you are saying any of it is that I walked through the wrong door at the wrong hour." She turned for the dark of the corridor. He said her name, and it cracked, and he said, "Please, and there is a poisoner loose and a warden downstairs and then he caught himself and forced out better words. "I need you," he said. "Please, I need you." And there it was. Even now, even with her whole heart in pieces on the muniment room floor. Not, "I am sorry." Not, "I cannot lose you. I need you." The blade needed. "Good night, Your Majesty," Rena said, and she walked out into the dark. "Rena." The voice came out of the shadows at the turn of the corridor, warm and low and known to her as her own pulse. And before she had thought better of it, she was moving toward it, because it was the voice that had pulled her out of the ashes when she was small and made her into someone who could stand on her own 2 feet. Alder stepped into the thin torchlight, gray and broad and steady, his old fighter's hands open at his sides, and his weathered face creased with a concern that reached right down into the child she had been. "There you are, girl. You are white as a corpse. What has he done?" His hands came down on her shoulders, warm and heavy. And it was almost more than she could bear. "Tell me," and because it hurt too much to hold alone, she told him that it had all been a lie. That the king had never wanted her, only the blade in her, only a way to reach, and here she stopped, because she could not force the last word past her teeth. But Alder's face had already softened into sorrow. "I know," he said gently. "I hope to spare you this. I have known since the first night what he was doing." "Ah, Rena, I am sorry," he sighed, and a sigh was the saddest, kindest thing she had ever heard, and it turned her stomach to water. "But it is worse than you know, child, far worse. I did not know how to tell you." His jaw hardened. "Tonight at the feast, the warden's son, the boy, Oven, the king had him taken, poisoned. Made sure the lad would be found ruined so the warden would have no choice but to sign the pass over rather than face the shame of it. I saw it done with my own eyes. Not an hour passed." Rena went very still. The king was a liar. That much she now knew the way she knew her own name. But she also knew, deeper than knowing, in the place where the note still faintly hummed, that Torin would sooner cut off his own hand than poison a guest child to win a pass. It was not in him. She had watched him for a month. She had seen the guilt come over him in the muniment room, and she had seen what guilt looked like on that face. and it did not look like a man who murdered children. It looked like a man ashamed of a lie about a marriage. And then the crack. Small, fatal. Not an hour passed, Alder had said. But an hour passed. The king had been on the colonnade with her, with a hollow's poison meant for his own cup. And then, in the muniment room where she had torn his heart out, the timeline did not fit. It could not fit. Which meant, the man saying, it was lying to her face, right now in the corridor, with his warm hands on her shoulders. The man who raised her. And all at once, everything Torin had said stood up straight and true. The coin, the wolves, carrying it, his sermon in her mouth, the blade Alder had raised in the dark, that Torin had needed turned in his hand. And here was Alder, turning her the other way, aiming her back at the king, like the blade she had spent her whole life refusing to be. She did not let it show. She was a hollow. Showing nothing was the first thing she had ever learned, and Alder himself had taught it to her, and now she used it on him. She let her face crumple into the grief and the fury he was counting on. "What do we do?" she whispered. His eyes sharpened with satisfaction, just for an instant, before the sorrow slid back over them. "We go to the warden now, tonight, before Torin can twist it. When the warden hears it, the king will fall. And there are good houses ready to steady the realm after, mine among them." He squeezed her shoulders. "But it cannot come from me, girl. They will say the old ringmaster grasps for a crown. It has to come from someone the whole court will believe." His voice went soft, almost tender. "It has to come from you, the king's own bride. If you say you saw Torin take his son, no wolf in that hall will doubt a single word." They walked, and it was the longest walk of Rena's life, because she had to get into that hall and turn his own trap inside out, and she had nothing to do it with but her word. And one wrong word would put the realm at war. The warden had taken the great council room in the east wing. Torin was there already, grave and cornered, and when the door opened, and he saw her come in behind Alder, his whole face lit for half a heartbeat, and then he saw who she walked with, and the light went out of him like a snuffed wick. "Warden Oster," Alder said, bowing low, "every inch the honest old soldier. It grieves me to bring this before you, but your son has been wronged by the man at your right hand." And he laid it out. The drug, the ruined boy, the pass-bot with a child's shame, and the warden came half out of his chair with a father's white fury. "That is a lie," Torin said. "Every word of it is his own." "He would say that," Alder said sadly. "Of course he would." But the king's own bride was there. He turned, and the whole room turned with him, to Rena, standing silent by the door. "It is plain to all this court that Rena loves the king. She has every reason in the world to shield the man she is sworn to wed." He held out a hand toward her, kind, certain, a father presenting a beloved daughter. "So ask her, warden. Ask her plainly. Rena, child, tell his grace what you saw." Every face in the room swung to her. The warden, leaning forward, desperate. A father, starving for the truth. Alder, sure of her, already counting his crown. And Torin, who believed she had come to bury him, who looked at her with no hope left at all, only a terrible readiness to be destroyed by the one wolf he had wronged. She looked at Torin. "I am sorry," she told him with no words at all. "I should have believed you." Then she turned to the warden. "I saw nothing of the sort," Rena said. "Because it never happened. Captain Alder Heiford is lying to you." The room drew tight as a bowstring. Alder went rigid at her side. "He says it happened within the hour," she said, her voice ringing clear and cold across the stone. "But within the hour, the king was at the feast, and then on the colonnade with me, and then below in the muniment room, and he never once went near your son. I know, warden, because I was with him the whole of it. Your son is unharmed. Send for him, now, this instant, while every wolf in this room can watch the door and see whether he walks in whole or not." The warden barked an order. A guard ran, and Alder's kind old face began, very slowly, to change. And there have been 3 attempts on the king's life this year. Rena went on, faster now, before the crack could close. There was poison in his cup tonight, at this feast, under this roof. I knocked it from his hand myself. And it was a hollow's poison, warden, scentless, made by the old craft, the Silent Blades craft, a craft that died out of this realm generations ago, and is known now to exactly one living wolf. She turned and looked at the man who had raised her, and her heart broke even as her voice held. The wolf, who hunted the last of the hollows to their deaths, and kept one alive, and raised her in the dark to be his blade. Search his quarters, warden, now, while he stands here and cannot reach them. See whether you find a wronged father, or a paymaster's ledger, and a jar of scentless death. The great doors opened. Owen of the Sunmark walked in, pale, confused, blinking at the sudden attention, and entirely, obviously, gloriously, alive and whole. The warden turned to Alder, and his face was terrible. "This is hysteria," Alder said, and for the first time in Rena's whole life she heard the warmth crack off his voice like ice off a spring branch. "The girl is distraught. He has poisoned her mind against me." "Then a search costs you nothing," said the warden quietly, and nodded to his guards, and Alder ran. He came straight at her, because she was closest, because she was the one who had done this, and she saw the blade slide out of his sleeve half a beat before he reached her. The old low draw he had drilled into her 1,000 times in the dark. But that was the trouble with teaching a hollow everything you know. She turned into him, caught the knife arm at the wrist, wrenched it exactly the way he had taught her to wrench it, and put the old ringmaster face down on the cold stone, with her knee between his shoulders, before he had finished his first stride. She leaned down close to his ear, and her tears fell on the back of his gray neck. "You taught me the low sweep, old man," she said. "You should have remembered what you made." Then the warden's guards hauled him up and dragged him out, and it was done. The council room emptied by degrees. The warden went to his son and gathered the bewildered boy against him. The councillors fled in tight, whispering knots to be the first to carry the tale. The guards took Alder down into the old cells beneath the stone crown. And then, as these things go, it was only the 2 of them left in the wreck of the room, the king and the hollow, and a silence with too much in it to hold. Torin had not moved. He was staring at her as though he had never seen her before. "You saved my life," he said. "After everything I did, you still—" "I came to stop a traitor," Rena said, and her voice came out flat and scoured. "That is all it was." The light in his face scuttered. "Rena, the answering, it is real. You felt it tonight, in front of the whole court. I know you did. A hollow answering. It has never happened in the history of your line. It means something. It means us. It does not matter whether it is real." She made herself say it, and it cost her more than the fight had. "You claimed me to reach the one wolf who ever loved me. You spent a month knowing exactly which old wound to press. And you pressed it, every day, with a smile. A note under my ribs does not undo a single hour of that." He flinched, and she made herself keep going. "Because if she stopped she would break. Tonight I lost the man who raised me and learned he was a monster who made me. I will not turn in the same breath and hand my trust to the wolf who used that monster's daughter to catch him. I have nothing left to be that brave with. Not tonight, maybe not ever. I love you," he said, and his voice was raw. "I do not care how it began. That does not change what it became. You are the truest thing that has ever—" "Do not." She stepped back, and every instinct she owned screamed at her to let him close the distance. "You can say the answering, like it is a key that unlocks everything. It is not. You had a month of truth you could have given me, and you spent it instead. A bond does not buy that back." She went to the door and stopped there, one hand on the cold frame, and did not turn around, because she could not do this looking at him. "I am glad you are alive. You will be a good king, I think. Better than they know. But I cannot trust you. I do not know if I ever will again." She heard him take a breath to answer. She did not wait for it. She walked out of the great council room and down through the fortress, and out the doors that a serving girl was never meant to pass. And no one stopped her, because she read as no one at all, and for once in her life she was grateful for it, because it meant no one could see her weep. She had been champion of the ring for 6 months, and she was good at it, and she had always known she would be. The stone crown was a different place now. Alder sat in the deep cells, Korik in the next one over. The two of them had worked into the guard, cut out clean, and the low city that had loved the old ringmaster had learned what he truly was and turned its love, slowly, toward the young king who had rooted him out. Torin had done all of that. He had also made Ren a champion, and set her over the very ring where she had once been dragged to be laughed at. And then he had spent the better part of those 6 months trying and failing to win her back. The flowers came first a month in. She came off a dawn watch and found the whole training yard drowned in them. Her own guards grinning like fools to see what she would do. Send them to the infirmary, she said, and the poorhouse. He tried the council chamber next, catching her eye across the war table, with a look that did something hopeful and uncertain, until she looked back down at the troop rolls, and he stopped. And he wrote to her 2 and 3 letters a week in his own hand. She swore she would not read them, and read every one. Near the bottom of one long page, she had sworn she would not finish. I told myself I claimed you to save your life, and there was some truth in it. But the truth, under the truth, is that I saw you snap a 9-year silence to spare a boy one blow, and I wanted, for the first time in my life, to be worth being seen by someone like that. I did not use you because you were a weapon. I used the weapon because I was a coward about the wanting. The note did not help. Leave a bond open and it deepens. Deepen it and it sets. So she kept it shut, clenched under her ribs like a fist around a coal, and hoped that, if she starved it long enough, it would wither and let her go. Sela and Pell had opinions, of course. By the 5th month, they had given up subtlety altogether. Champion, Sela said, with respect. He sorted the back pay. Alder bled off the whole guard. He has written you 34 letters, which I have counted, and you are both plainly miserable. Talk to the man. I was used, Rena said, and set down her pen. I am not queuing up for a second turn. The ring runs clean. I would like to be left in peace to do my work. Then, in the 6th month, a letter came that was different. Rena, you have made yourself plain and you have every right to it, and I will respect it now, the way I should have respected the truth from the start. I will stop. No more flowers, no more letters, no more lingering by doors. You are free of me. Be well and be happy, and know the realm is safer for having you in it. Torin, she read it twice. This was exactly what she had wanted for 6 months, and she could not understand, alone in the champion's chamber with the fire dying, why it felt so much like losing. He kept his word. No letters, no flowers, only a nod in the corridors. Champion, polite, and not cold, never cold, only done. And every night, the warm thread under her ribs refused to wither, no matter how she starved it, and she began, privately, to fear she had made a terrible mistake she did not know how to unmake. And then, in the small hours of an ordinary night, the knock came, and Pell was in her doorway with Sela at his shoulder, both of them, the particular gray of wolves who have made a very large mistake. What? Rena said, already on her feet. What is it, the king? Pell said, and his voice cracked down the middle the way it had the first day she ever saved him. He is gone, not in his chambers, not anywhere, no guard, no word. His sword on its stand, his cloak on its hook, the room empty. No one has seen him since the 10th bell. He swallowed. Champion, someone has taken him. For one heartbeat, Rena could not make her legs work. Then 9 years of training took the wheel and she was moving, snapping orders. Wake the trackers, his scent off the chamber and every gate. Quietly, no bells, no alarm. They moved and came back grim, because they had caught his scent at the east postern and lost it there, the way a scent stops when a wolf is being carried, or when a wolf is being very, very careful. Rena stood in the cold pre-dawn yard, with the wind cutting through her, and she knew there was one way left to find him, and she had known it from the moment Pels had gone. She pressed her hand to her sternum, over the note she had been strangling for half a year. It is duty, she told herself. He is the king. Finding him is my task, and nothing more. It was not only that, she knew it was not. She opened the bond. It hit her like a door blown off its hinges in a storm. His feelings poured through her all at once, and the first was not terror, which was strange. There was fear in it, yes, but a small nervous fear, the kind before a leap and not the kind under a knife. And under the fear, absurdly, impossibly, something warm and stubborn and hopeful, like a wolf who has bet everything he has on a single throw and is waiting, heart in his throat, to see how it lands. That was not the shape of a man, being carried off to his death. She was moving before she finished the thought, out, at a dead run, following the pull of him like a rope through the sleeping city, down off the crown and through the low streets where the dawn had not yet reached, to the one place her feet had climbed 1,000 times. She came up short in the churned grass at the edge of it, and stopped. The ring, the proving ground, and in the gray first light, standing alone in the center of the ring where she had once been dragged to be laughed at, was the Alpha King of Caldmere. His fine coat was gone. He stood in a plain challenger's shirt, torn, and his lip was split, and one eye was darkening, and around him in a loose ring stood a dozen of her own guards looking profoundly uncomfortable. "What," said Rena into the silence, "is happening here?" Torin turned and found her at the edge of the ring, and his battered face broke open into something so relieved and so undefended that it hurt to look at. "Ah," he said, and his voice was thick and he swayed a little on his feet. "You came? I was not sure the note would carry." "I have been letting your guards knock me down for the better part of an hour. To be certain, it was ringing loud enough to reach you." He spat blood into the grass, almost cheerful about it. "They are very good, by the way. I have lost every single bout." That was rather the point. She came through the ring of guards, who melted gratefully back, and stopped an arm's length from him in the exact spot where he had first stood over her 6 months ago and asked her name. "You made yourself vanish," she said, low and shaking with fury and something else. "You let the whole crown think you were taken. You have half my guard, black and blue. Why? Why would you?" "Because you would not open the bond for a letter," he said simply. "Not for flowers, not for 6 months of me lingering at doors like a fool. You had it shut so tight I could feel the wall of it across a war table. And I understood at last that you would never open it for a man who was safe and whole and kingly and in control." He spread his torn, bruised hands, and the gray eyes she had first seen doing cold arithmetic were doing none at all now, open all the way to the bottom. "But you would open it to save someone. It is who you are. It is the thing you snapped 9 years of silence for. So, I gave you someone to save. I made myself, for one morning, into no one, beaten and nameless in a ring, exactly the way you were the day I first saw you and understood I was ruined, so that you would reach for me and feel there was no lie left in me at all. Look." He tapped his own chest, over the note that hummed between them, loud and unguarded and true. "No mask, no angle, it is all just yours." Rena could feel it. Through the open bond, it poured into her, plain as sunrise, the fear and the hope and the 6 months of missing her, that it felt, he let her feel, exactly like, slowly dying. No cleverness. The wolf who hid everything, hiding nothing at all, standing bloody and beaten in the middle of the ring, where her whole life had turned over. "You are a fool," she whispered. "A tremendous one," he agreed. "I have been a coward twice." Once when I used a weapon instead of admitting I wanted the woman. And once these 6 months, letting you push me off with a shut door, because it was easier to lose you slowly than to risk being told no to my face. He went down then, not to one knee, like a king, but all the way into the churned grass of the ring, sitting back on his heels in the dirt where the low wolves bled, and looked up at her. So here is me being brave at last, in the only ring that ever mattered. I am no one. I have nothing you need. You are the champion, and I am the wolf. You just beat black and blue, in a manner of speaking. His battered mouth curved, and it wobbled, and the bravado fell all the way off it, and what was left was small and raw, and utterly undefended. Choose me not the crown, me the empty coat and all. I dare you, I dare you. She knew that dare from the inside. It was the same reckless thing that had stood up in her own chest, 9 years deep, and made her set down a tray and step into a ring she was never meant to enter, in front of the whole city, to spare a boy one blow. She looked down at the king of all Caldmere, sitting in the dirt of her ring, undefended, everything he had thrown down into the grass at her feet, waiting to see whether she would pick it up. "Stand up," she said. His face fell. "Rena, stand up." She reached down and took his bloody hand, and hauled him to his feet, the exact way she had hauled a dozen guards off the grass over 6 months, the exact way no one had ever once bothered to haul her, and she did not let go once he was up. I am not going to have it said that the champion of the ring let her king propose to her sitting in the mud like a beaten pup. If you are going to be a fool in front of my whole guard, be a standing one. The relief that broke over him was so total that the note between them flared with it, and she felt her own answer it at last. The fist around the coal opening all the way, 6 months of starved warmth flooding both directions at once, until she did not know whose joy was whose. "Is that," he said, carefully, hardly daring. "Is that a yes?" "It is an ask again," she said, sober, and not bleeding, and not with my entire guard pretending they cannot hear every word. But she had not let go of his hand, and she did not, and the corner of her mouth had gone traitor on her entirely. "Ask me again tomorrow, Torin, when you can stand on your own 2 feet and find out." And the Alpha King of Caldmere, black-eyed and split-lipped, and grinning like the happiest fool in the realm, said, "Tomorrow, then," and lifted her hand to his ruined mouth and kissed her knuckles in front of every guard she had. And for once in her life, Rena did not care in the least who saw. He asked her again the next day, and the day after. Sober, and standing across the war table until Sella threatened to resign in writing, and on the cold east wall, with spiced milk going cold in his hands, and once with so many flowers, the training yard smelled like a spring funeral. He asked her badly and beautifully every single day, and every single day she told him to ask again tomorrow, until one perfectly ordinary morning she looked at the man grinning hopefully at her over breakfast. And the note under her ribs sang, and she said yes. The whole city came out for it. The young king no one had taken seriously, and the quiet hollow no one had been able to see, who had walked into his ring as no one at all, and walked out the one wolf in the realm he could not live without. He wept during the binding. She had known he would. But the note gave her away, in front of everyone too, and he laughed at her through his own tears, and she stopped caring who saw. "You are stuck with me now," he murmured when it was done. "No taking it back." "Why would I take it back?" said Rena. "I am the one who won you in a ring first, if you recall." And she kissed the Alpha King of all Caldmere, and for once she did not argue about the last word.